The hills are. Oh, sorry. I was just watching this. The sound of music. Now, of course, I changed the words. The hills are alive with the sound of Ubuntu.
Well, greetings, everybody. This is, of course, a joint stream. I'm over here on SwitchedtoLinux. You can check my stream out over there. Carmine is
the hills are. Oh, sorry. I was just watching
today.
The sound of music. And we
Now,
got.
of course, I
changed the words. Who is on his the hills are alive with the sound of Ubuntu. So before we begin, I want to give a quick shout out to our friend Stephanie up from Boston. If you don't know who she is, check out the August 3rd concert she did on my channel. She is basically the angelic voice on YouTube. Watch the concert. You know what I mean. Stephanie, hi. All right. So tonight for Life in Linux, I believe it's number 16, we'll talk a little bit about the top news, some of the top news year in review. Obviously, 12 months of news, we can be on all night. But I picked 5 news items. I think Switch has a few, and maybe Tim. So that is the topic for tonight. Not necessarily just Linux. At least not on my part, some random news articles. And that'll be the year in review. So for 2018, which is almost over, another couple weeks. Wow. As they say, time flies, especially when you're using Linux, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me get started, and then I think what I'll do is I'll go through each one, and then if you guys want to comment, and then we'll move on to my next one. Like I said, I have 5. So, all right. So one of the top items, I guess the future of cell phones is foldability. Samsung's coming out with the Samsung Galaxy phone that folds. I guess they're going to call it the Samsung Galaxy Fold. This phone will be coming out, I believe, the first quarter, and the price, if I got my news correctly, $1,800
Yep.
for a foldable phone. It's kind of cool looking at the snapshots here. The question is, will it work as intended? But $2,000 for a phone, for me personally, no thank you. But that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
I think anyone who would pay $2,000 for a folding cell phone should probably find better things to do with their money.
Unless it comes with a nuclear-powered battery, I don't want it. Yeah. You know, because I got a feeling this battery will last a day when you unfold it to this big tablet, you know.
And I'm really concerned about the long-term durability of this device, at least in its first generation or two.
Because it's new. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And so actually, more people have these than I thought, really. I mean, I pulled up an article here, and the LG has this folding phone, Samsung, Motorola, Huawei. A lot of them. Interesting. I think Galaxy, the Samsung one, was, as you mentioned, I think was the first to market.
Yeah. Tim, what do you think?
You know, like Tom said, the premise behind it, that's kind of neat. I mean, let's face it, a foldable phone. There's some coolness factor to that. But buying something first generation, I don't know. I'd want to give it. I'd probably want to give it a couple of iterations before I would even think about buying one.
At least a year, maybe 2. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Put it this way: $1,800 for a phone. I have noticed. I'm a motorhead, a petrol head, and I've noticed that a lot of the high-end car makers, Porsche, Lamborghini, Ferrari, people like that, have went out and gotten phones from different makers, and they have branded them, done some certain things to it that fit for people that own their cars, and they're about $1,000. I would be more apt to buy one of those. Yeah, it's still a high price phone, but kind of a brand loyalty type of thing, I guess, to a degree.
Yeah.
But foldable smartphone, we'd have to give it a couple of years before I'd give it a shot.
If Samsung wants to send me one to test, New York style review, or forget about it, I'll be happy to test it. But
there you go.
Anyway, so the Samsung Fold. All right, what's
let me see if I have anything here related to that in my
sure,
comments.
go ahead.
I see a couple of people they're expensive. Samsung Galaxy line is getting a flip phone. Yes. Norman Inglis says waste of money. Oh, heck no, says Bite My Vape. Foldable tracking device. Yay!
Yeah, right.
I think those are some of the comments that I'm seeing here.
Okay.
Same tracking.
To that.
Same tracking device, half the size.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
All right. Next item I have, YouTube news. YouTube took down 58 million videos in 3 months due to adult content and spam. Well, that's a no-no if that's the case, and they took down, wow, that's a lot of videos, 58 million videos in 3 months.
What do they consider adult content? Words or...
It's probably a little bit of both. Suggestive words, body parts. I mean, if I was in charge of this, that's what I would be looking for or hearing for. You know, anything that's a joke here and there, I wouldn't worry about. But if it's suggestive, more, you know, intentional versus an accident versus a, you know, a clothing malfunction, as it were. Yeah. So they took out a lot, 58 million. So there you go.
So we have to give a lot of credit to them that you know, we don't get a lot of this stuff showing up. But of course, YouTube, I'm okay with you know, PH sites and stuff like that existing. I'm not going to go there. A little shady, but I'm okay with them having their own dedicated place. It's the same thing with like movie ratings and things. I'd rather have movie ratings than government regulation, because government regulation is generally problematic. And if you know anything about the history of movie ratings, they showed up because it was either you guys have to regulate yourselves or we're going to regulate you for you. And I'd rather have some way of blocking. Like I actually like what UK is doing. Like they're not all of it, of course, but the idea that you have to do something to verify your age to get past the paywall to view adult content. And I think YouTube overall does a generally good job of keeping adult content off.
They are enforcing their own guidelines.
Yep,
So,
I like that. That's very good.
So I would have to agree, yeah. All right, let's see. I guess we all agree on that one. The next news article, this is big news. Of course, this is the year of Facebook that lost face, I guess you could say. You know, the privacy, data mining, the oopsies, they accidentally released your information, your photos. Of course, we know what happened a couple of years ago with, what was it, Cambridge Analytica and all that. You know, it's a shame we don't have a true alternative to Facebook, at least none that I see. But that was probably, in terms of social oopsies, that was probably the biggest news of the year. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Tim, you want to start on that one?
You know, when it comes to Facebook, I really could give two shakes less, because I think that the platform is overrated. Very seldom do I see Facebook being used for any real sense of good, and that's, you know, to the computing world at large, even to the world at large. I don't belong to Facebook. I think I might have an account out there that I didn't delete from years ago, but you know, Facebook is one of those entities in the world that I just kind of see as, you know what, if they disappear tomorrow, I think the world's going to be a better place, to be quite frank with you. I'd hate to, you know, on the flip side of that, and kind of playing devil's advocate, I would hate to see the people that use it for its legitimate purposes, getting in contact with people, family get-together, online get-togethers, that type of stuff. I would feel really bad for them. But to be quite honest with you, if it went away tomorrow, I think there'd be a lot of happier people walking the planet. And I feel that way about Twitter. Twitter, to me, I do have a Twitter account, but I just use that as a place that's really easy for me to collect headlines, because I'm kind of a news junkie. So I follow, you know, probably 24 news outlets. And then I follow a couple of things that are of interest to me, motorsports, the Minnesota Vikings, stuff like that. But if that went away tomorrow, okay. If Twitter ceased to exist, I would be just as fine with that as if Facebook disappeared. And I think Instagram is just a pile of crap. I don't think Instagram serves any purpose other than people throwing pictures out there.
Yeah. Dabbler49 says Facebook's only virtue is it's not Twitter.
But
yeah, I think Facebook has been limping along for the better part of 2 decades without having a major leak of data, and all of a sudden it's kind of like all the stuff that they had, all the stuff they've been doing, all the stuff that they control has been behind some giant dam, and the wall broke this year because we started the year with the Cambridge Analytica. We got 50 million users in September, 4 million user data leak in August, 30 million. That was the 50 million. It was actually 50, not 30. 87 million users affected in April, and then of course there was just one. I reported on my news on Friday. There was another Facebook leak this last week as well.
Yeah.
So it's like all of a sudden, this place that we have been literally storing every piece of our digital life is just spilled out into the entire internet. And then, of course, social media addiction. Agent Staffen on my channel says, what do you think about social media addiction? Why meet friends, family and friends on social media? That's a fun, fascinating question. There's legitimate places for it. Obviously, there's certainly people that don't live next to each other as much, and it's a lot easier. That's why, like, I started a Facebook account for 2 reasons when I started one like a decade and a half ago, and for the record, I don't have one any longer. I was caught up in it just as much as everyone else. I've never really addicted to it, but I started up for a couple reasons. Number one is I was mentoring a lot of kids who are just starting to go through adolescence at the time, and Facebook was a fabulous way to keep an eye on what they're doing. And for that reason, it was a fascinating thing. Now, you wouldn't do that with Facebook now because it's not relevant among the teens. You'd follow them on Instagram or something else. But the second reason is I used to send out, I had friends, and I still have friends all over the country, and I'd send out email notices, every now and again. It turns out that nearly every single person I was sending emails out to, which included pictures, what I was doing, things like that, every one of them was on Facebook, and I could very easily put those same photos up on Facebook. Now, the downside is I've opened those up to people that I don't necessarily want to see them through the data leaks. And so it's I feel in a way like a wounded warrior because I stopped sending the emails when I was on Facebook. I got off of Facebook and I haven't resumed those emails because I don't know how to reach half these people anymore. They're not on Facebook. And that unfortunately means that Facebook actually destroyed real relationships because I don't even know how to reach them anymore.
Yeah.
That's a sad thing.
The one thing you said, Tom, that the dam is kind of broke.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here, to continue with that metaphor, before that dam broke, to me it would seem awfully, awfully strange if that dam was kind of like an asteroid strike. Mm-hmm. It just, everything's great and then bang. I have a hard time with that. How many people were running around sticking their fingers in holes in the dam prior to the dam breaking that we don't know about because of the continued lack of transparency? That's something that's scary to me.
Yep. Anyway, we need an alternative called Family Book. I think I've mentioned it before, so just a thought throwing it out there. Something that is sponsored and paid for by the users and not, other entities, as it were. I think there's a market for that, just like it's time we have a National Linux desktop, but I'll get to that in a moment. Okay, I guess 2018 was the year of the SSD, solid-state drives. I got my first one this year, just a simple 128 gig, was it $40? They're freaking awesome. I mean, it's my first one, and somebody commented, really? Thought this is your first one? Yeah, I guess I came late to the SSD party.
Well,
I'm running it now, so yeah.
Kind of has something to do when you bought your last piece of equipment.
Yeah.
What was in it, the lifespan of the equipment, because dare to say, right now it's kind of a flux. You can get, laptops with either or, spinning drives or SSDs.
Yeah.
A couple of years from now, you're probably going to be hard pressed to find something that's got a spinning drive.
Right. I mean, I'll admit I'm running outdated equipment here, but you know what? It's reliable. It runs Linux fine. And I thought, let me try something fairly inexpensive just to see if all this is what it's cracked up to be. And sure enough, man, I'm using, I would say Linux 80%, Windows 10 20%, and most of that is because the SSD is running Linux and Windows 10 is not. So there you go, guys. If you want to cheaply upgrade your computer, a simple SSD drive is the way to go. So, all right, I mentioned that another year went by, and I think Linus Torvalds said in an interview he was somewhat disappointed that this year was another, not the year of the Linux desktop, another failure, sort of, but he has hope. There's little spurts of good news out there. Someone on a blog voted the Dell XPS 13. I'm not being sponsored by Dell, but that machine was voted the best Linux laptop of 2018. Dell, an American company running Ubuntu. Awesome news, except for a little problem. It runs about $1,000. Now, if you're going to spend $1,000, that's not for the masses. And if you're going to spend that, if you have that kind of a budget, I'll probably go with the Pixelbook, because you get 3 OSs for the type of one, for the price of one. You have what? Your Chrome OS, Android, and what? Now Debian apps, right? You can run on there.
Yep. So,
you know, it's, again, this machine I think is for a very select market. I think it's awesome that they proved, Dell has proved, and Lenovo and some others, that Linux can run, I'm assuming bug-free, in a machine. It's just that Mr. and Mrs. Consumer with 3-4 kids is not going to spend $1,000 on a machine. At least I don't think so.
Yeah.
So another year has gone by, unfortunately, without a National Linux desktop. There's room for it. There's a market for it. $400 has to be the sweet spot for a family.
It would be absolutely awesome if System 76 and what's the other big one? The two big Linux computer companies that we have, it would be absolutely awesome if they picked up a cheap low-end model computer and made it work with Linux. It'd be awesome if
they don't need to start off with a big gaming 4K computer. It's not necessary. Like, it's not necessary, right? Yeah.
I've looked at that, and it's like I don't really do much, and I don't really recommend going over there, because that is like, dude, the computer that I have down here way outspecs their computers. And I paid half of what their lowest model is for it.
Right. Yeah.
I can't justify sending somebody over there unless you completely have no idea what you're doing, can't install an operating system on your computer, then there's no reason to spend the extra
This is
money
something
for it.
like if I had a bigger channel with money to blow, I would buy it just to test and maybe like to give it away, you know. But for me to use personally, no. It's not really priced right for the masses. Now, but for what it does, for what it is, that's good news, because again, they approve, and so has Lenovo, Google. You can make a reliable Linux machine. The Pixelbook has been described as flawless.
Yeah. Well, I got
so
right here. Look at. I have right here. This computer cost me $100. I have never had an error with Linux on it at all, of any way, shape, or form.
That's a Lenovo. Okay, yeah.
This is a Lenovo. It runs Peppermint. It still runs Peppermint 7 because I don't have a reason to update it. It accepts all updates. It's never broken, never bricked, never left me hanging. It is absolutely awesome, and I paid $100 for it. No.
You know, you got to think about the marketing departments in, you know, be it Dell, especially System 76. If me or Toss or SwitchedtoLinux, I would say, and this is a generalization, out of 100 people that would walk up to us and say, I want to get a good, reliable, inexpensive laptop, we would be able to point them in hundreds and hundreds of directions with machines that cost anywhere, like Tom's $100 deal, all the way up to roughly $400. And that's where we would point them. Hey, look, and that's what most people use their machines for. They check their email, they surf the web, they do the social media thing, and they sit down and they write a letter every so often.
Right.
And maybe they have a budget that's in an Excel spreadsheet that they run their household off of.
Well, these machines like this and System 76, you know, they're not designed for like newbies. They're just not. they're designed for people who know what they are buying, and they know exactly what they want. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. They've taken care of that small market. What about the other 90% of the people out there?
Yep. And why not give something that fits all? If they can make compute, my take on it is if Dell or Lenovo or any of the other regular PC makers out there, if they can come up with a Windows machine that runs reliably, does 99.9% of the stuff on a daily basis that I need to get done, and stick Windows on it, they sure as heck can make one that's got Linux on it.
And Google has proven it with Chromebooks starting at $200, sometimes at the holidays even less. Granted, it's low end, but they work, so they've proven it.
You can go to the Micro Center website right now, and they have a Chromebook at $99.
Wow.
$99. It is a not the current generation, it's a generation before.
Okay.
It was one of their lesser popular models. I can't remember who it was. It may be a Samsung machine.
Okay.
$100.
Yeah.
They've got them in stores, and you can order it online.
Well, there you go. It can be done, but it's not being done. I still see only two companies that have the resources, Amazon and Google, if they want to do it. Maybe they are thinking about it. I don't know. Or maybe they just don't care. Maybe they don't need it. Maybe they don't need that extra headache or that extra market. But man, you think there wouldn't be a substantial amount of Windows users like myself who just are fed up with Windows 10 with all that's been going on behind the scenes?
Yep.
And I still use Windows 10 because it does work. But I mean, the last 3 or 4 months with all these updates breaking things, we need a Windows 11. We really do. Meaning, Windows 11. Here's the EULA, 1 page, not 50 of them. You need to call 6 lawyers, and then each lawyer calls a lawyer. Okay, now what do I do here? 1 page. Okay, 2 pages. Excuse me. And then on the last page at the bottom, if you don't agree to being tracked, click no. Simple.
Yeah, but that's unfortunately not in their interest. Talk about computers, though. The other one I have now, this one's just a writing computer. It's 2 gigs of RAM. I wouldn't expect too much.
Yeah.
The other computer that I have, which is my mobile production computer, meaning it can do everything I can do, from producing videos, doing websites, anything I need a computer to do, cost me $400. It is a Dell Inspiron. I think it's a 7148. I might be wrong on that exact model number.
Okay.
It had 6 gigs RAM. I upgraded it to 8. It has a Core i5 5th gen processor in it, and it has been running Linux Mint through 4 different update cycles without ever having any issues at all. It is absolutely rock solid.
It can be done.
Yep, $400.
All right.
And,
all right.
And that's the thing. And that came. I mean, I bought it at a floor model, but that came with Windows on it. What if I can get that without the operating system?
All right. Well, Mark says Windows 10 is 2 short pages. What the EULA? Yeah, but the fine print is like this. I need binoculars to see what it says. So.
How about a magnifying or a telescope? What is it? A microscope. There you go.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's on my end. That's all my news articles. What do you have, Tim? Anything?
As far as the year in review with Linux,
anything sticks out for you?
For me, the big thing is the addition of being able to run Linux applications on a Chromebook.
That's big news, yeah.
Because I think that it took, for sure, a lot of work. I'm sure for the minds at Google not to get it to work, but I think it took a lot of discussion as to, hey, do we want to do this? Because let's face it, Google runs the risk is that sooner or later, when people that don't have any Linux experience, but they're starting to get acclimated to the Chromebook, they go out and say they spend $400 to $500 on a mid-range Chromebook, right? And they find out that I can go and I can get these Debian applications, and I can use the developer mode on the Chromebook, and it's actually Project Christini. And through all of that, I can grab this really, really cool Photoshop replacement called GIMP and throw this onto this operating system, and I can get it to work. Okay,
it's funny what they call it. That's something I sprinkle on pasta, crostinis, you know. But no, go ahead.
But they do that, right? But then the user on the Chromebook, say they start to go through a transition in their life, professionally or personally, where the limitations of Chrome OS, it being more cloud-centric, things of that nature, tend to limit them a little bit on what they're able to do with the machine. And they think, hey, wait a sec, you know what? I could go out and buy, like Tom this said, I can go out and buy a heck of a good machine for $300 to $400, and I can open it up, and I don't even have to boot into Windows. I can have a flash drive with Linux on it. What type of an alternative is that instead of buying the Chromebook? And that being said, I believe that there is something that is going to happen that, as you've said, Toss, repeatedly, a nationalized or maybe even globalized Linux desktop. I would not be surprised whatsoever that Chrome OS is going to do some type of an evolution. They're always going to keep their cloud side. Let's face it, they always will. That's where they make their money, from the cloud side. I would tend to think that that OS is going to go through some evolutions, and running applications on the machine and working locally on the machine within a file manager is going to be happening sooner than we would think. The other thing that stuck out to me this last year was Linus Torvalds stepping down from the Linux Foundation. One could argue, for me, I don't get into a lot of the technical side of Linux. You guys know that. I'm a user. I'm not a tinkerer. I'm not a Quint or a Ben. I just use a computer, and if it doesn't work for me, I find an OS that will. Him stepping down and going through the transition, the personal growth that he has, nothing against his personal growth, but is that going to hurt the kernel development in some way, shape, or form?
Nah, I don't think so. He's back anyway. He returned a humbled man,
Yep.
I think he said.
Yep.
He realized, I mean, there was a listing of his emails he had sent over the years. There was a pattern. They were not friendly.
Oh,
That's
no,
putting it mildly. So
they weren't.
I think he realized, you know what? There was no need to repeat. If you say it once or twice, it don't. But there was a pattern.
Yep.
I think you realize, and I think he'll be a better man for it. So good for him.
I think so too. I hope that because the man is making changes to himself, that he continues with the innovation and the leadership and the things that he's brought to making such a great base for all of these OSs to sit upon. I hope that doesn't suffer whatsoever. And I do agree with you. I doubt if it will. Let's hope that that's the case.
Okay.
And other than that, the only thing that I can report personally in the year in Linux is and I've said this before and I'll say it again, and I'm not beating up any OS in particular, but I think that there needs to be some type of standardization in the QA with Linux distros before they hit the open airwaves, so to say. For me, yeah, I understand that Linux can run on varying hardware. I understand that there's a lot of work that goes into it, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, just the one Achilles heel that I've had all year, well, since I started doing streams with you, Toss, is this browser issue with, and I'm not, and it won't work on a Google product. I'm using a Google product, trying to use it on a Google product on top of an operating system that otherwise runs great on my piece of equipment, and something this isn't working. And that, to me, I don't think that that's anything other than, hey, the QA got to 99.5% on a distro before it got released, and I just simply happened to deal with the 0.5% that wasn't even on the radar screens when the QA happened. And I understand perfection is in the eye of the beholder. I would just like to see the QA pieces with the distros come up. I'm not saying they have to revamp it. Bring it up just a little bit more of a notch.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at it from the technical side, maybe before you release this thing, throw it out to 100 users and have 100 users use it and play around with it. And when they encounter an issue, go after those issues.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, it's anytime you're trying to do something like getting a nationalized or a standardized Linux distribution, it's not the core of what the Linux community is, which is based on choice. A nationalized standard is not based on choice. It's based on somebody dictating to the user base what uses it, and that comes down to the marketing. That comes down to what's right, what's wrong. It's just that each company needs to be dedicated to supporting it on their own. And supporting it well. Like there was a hilarious story about the woman, and of course some I can find no better phrase to use than brain dead people came up with this idea, this news article. So this woman gets a Dell computer and she didn't know any better, because she was uneducated probably, and she bought a Dell computer that had Ubuntu. And they're trying to go and like, oh, we tried to get her a computer back and she had to withdraw from classes because this thing won't work with Windows programs. I'm like, oh God, this is like, there's something so wrong on that level. The fact of the matter is, though, is that Dell did not have enough information attached to that product, or maybe they did and the person just didn't read it. That's a different argument. But it was otherwise difficult to figure out what is the difference between this and that. What is the advantage of this and that? Each company that wants to sell a Linux-based product has to deal with those on their own individual thing, rather than come out with this whole nebulous thing, because you either get the Microsoft model, which is where you get Windows and hundreds and thousands and millions and billions of hardware configurations, or you get Apple, which you only have, zero choice on the hardware and the software combined. And neither one of those is really a good option, and that's where Linux shines, because it has the ability and the flexibility and the adaptability, not only with the hardware, but with your user preference as well. And so it's hard to say we're going to standardize a desktop, because some people really like the Mac UI, some people really like the old Windows UI, some people really like the new Windows UI, and you're not going to get one that works well for everybody.
Well, a standard desktop would just be a choice. People don't have to buy it. It would just be a choice. But say they did it and they sold buckets of it. Think about it. We have a national desktop that's based on quality that happens to be called Linux. You think that wouldn't promote a Linux desktop more in general, just from a marketing point of view, But it would be a choice. People have heard of Ubuntu, Linux Mint, wanted to try it. They couldn't get this to work, that to work. But let's say Google had it standardized. Now all the vendors are on board. Your browser will work. Your printers are going to work. Your graphics, your games are going to work. I think it would be a good thing, because it would be a choice, not an elimination of the rest, but a choice to prove to people the potential of Linux. But that's how I see it as a user of both Windows and Linux anyway.
Yeah, and it's important to recognize that there are some companies that you can buy computers with Linux if you ask, like Dell. I think Lenovo does in some markets, and there's another one as well. What's the other one?
They're out there. We just got to have one that's a sweet spot for $400.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. The way we get Linux out there is to have these available at a Best Buy, at a Walmart, with a knowledgeable person who can honestly talk about it, and not just try and sell the machine, but really educate somebody, as they're saying it. Say, no, this is not going to work with your Microsoft Office, like the software that you install on the computer, but it will work just fine with the online-only one, because that's web-based.
Yeah.
So you have that type of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And if doing that, and in doing that, if you pick the right Linux distro that would go on to this, whatever the hardware might be, I think Linux Mint has excellent paper documentation, right? They have a PDF, and I think it's really good. The last time I looked at it, I thought it was pretty good. Ubuntu has. Don't they have help.ubuntu.com? And that's not the forum. That is actually the
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Help pages.
Yeah.
I mean, if you pick the right distro, it makes it so easy for the hardware maker. instead of them having to come up with their own documentation. Of course, somebody like Dell is going to want to take everything off of a distro's website and put the Dell logo up at the top. But at least it's there. The only thing they have to do is add their logo to it and say, this is the software. This is
a welcome video when you buy the machine, a nice welcome video with somebody speaking like me. Okay, my name is Carmine from New York. Now, let me tell you what you bought. This is not a Windows machine, but we think it's better. Now, pay attention. Put down the freaking cannolis and watch the something to, you know, maybe not that forward, but something to grab the person's attention, like, and make it funny. Why not? You know.
If you put it, you know what, with Windows, you can't get to the desktop without clicking I agree on the EULA.
I know.
Why not put, if you have a Linux distro that's on a laptop, you put a video on, how long does it take you to go through that stupid EULA?
Yeah. And then sign it. Now make sure you read the forget about it EULA at the end, right, for Linux. There you go.
For Linux, you put a video on that's, say, 7 to 12 minutes long, and you don't get to the OS until you have watched that video. What's wrong with that?
Be nothing wrong. It would be something new. It would be something halfway comical. And who's this guy? What's this? Oh, it's better than Windows. Really? Okay, prove it to me. And then the person moves on to the OS.
So Benjamin Eldridge has this figured out. He says, let's make the national distro Arch, give them the machine with a live USB stick, and tell them to have fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ask Ubuntu site. Frostbite.
So somebody brought it up in my comments, and also I think this is probably behind the Mark Yates thing on your feed as well.
Okay.
We're more concerned with the Linux code of conduct at times than Linus Torvalds' arrival and departure. As I had mentioned, I was curious if you guys followed my news on Friday, and I pointed out that Linux Foundation has that little donation link down there saying that 100% of donations will fund diversity projects. You'd think if you're donating to the Linux Foundation, it'd be supporting Linux projects. And I was like, when did that show up? It turns out that showed up on their website starting around July, according to the Wayback Machine. Prior to the July snapshots, it simply said, hey, United States donators may not give that. Now, since July, which, by the way, a 3-month lead-in for Torvalds stepping down and things and adopting a new code of conduct, the fact that they've been talking about this since July and that very quietly added to the website means that they were putting this in the background. And this gets at the heart of what my argument of that issue has always been, is that this allows weirdness to start creeping in. The same weirdness we see in other areas is now slowly creeping into Linux. I think that that's what Mark's getting at, and somebody else on my channel is getting at that as well. Because you'd think that a donation to the Linux Foundation would support Linux. It goes to diversity programs, as Carmen was saying. What do you mean by that? I don't know what you mean by diversity project in context of the Linux Foundation.
Normally, I would say that's not what I gave for, but okay, I want to be friendly and human. What does that mean, diversity project? What does it mean? Tell me. And if you're not telling me, then I'm not going to give anymore. But that's how I see it. So anyway,
okay. Tim, any comment on that?
Well, I'm sorry. I was typing in the chat.
Oh. I was just asked if you had any comment on that as well. The
Linux Foundation?
Yeah. It has to do with that interesting phraseology that showed up at the bottom in conjunction with the code of conduct that is all about diversity, inclusion, rather than a meritocracy. And frankly, to be perfectly honest, I don't care what color, gender, ideology, thought, faith, religion, whatever the person is that contributed the code to the Linux Foundation. I want it to be well-written code that works, and that is unfortunately called a meritocracy. I want my Linux kernel to be a meritocracy, not diversity for sake of diversity. And the fact that that little thing showed up on the bottom of the donation page, it says every contribution to the Linux Foundation will go towards diversity. That's what I was asking about.
Here's the thing. Diversity is a tough word for me. Just as it stands as a word. If you have a foundation and that foundation is going to be doing something that is for the greater good of a specific segment of society, I can understand that there has to be some type of a level playing field with how people interact with one another. And I get that. But you know what? Me giving money to a foundation, and the only thing they're going to put that money towards is diversity. The Linux Foundation is not there to promote diversity in the computing world at large, or the Linux world at large. Correct? That is not their number one top of the mission statement. You know, it's to promote Linux is what it's there for. And you know, that gets to the point where you start looking at a slippery slope.
Yep.
You know, you're going to have contributors come and go when it comes to the desktop, everywhere between the kernel all the way to the finished product that I put on a USB stick and boot up. If those people are not going to act in a realistic human way towards one another, the people using their OS, time will be the test for that, and sooner or later the clock is going to weed out the chumps. As time goes on, the people that aren't going to pay attention to this, they're going to be jerks with what it is they're doing, or jerks to the people that are using the pieces that they're contributing to. Sooner or later they're going to go away. And you know what, I would rather wait for time to weed those out rather than me paying a bunch of money into a foundation to try to promote that diversity, because money is not going to promote diversity, not unless all of us give tens of thousands of dollars to the Linux Foundation and they take that and they split it up amongst the developers of Linux. Because the only way people are going to change is if A, they want to change because of themselves, or B, they're getting some type of financial reward to be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's all I had from my end of news for the year. Obviously, there's tons more. We could go on 5-6 hours, but not tonight.
Yeah.
So
not tonight.
Not tonight. Yeah. Just looking at the comments here, but looks like some people agree. So okay. Hello, Sleepy. How are you?
He was on his lunch break.
Okay.
I think I saw him say.
So anyway, I had allotted an hour for this. We still have about 15 minutes. So before we go into any other topics, I wanted to say to everyone, thank you for another year of Total OS today. It's been my pleasure. March coming will be 9 years. All I can say is thank you and wow. I didn't expect to be here because, again, this channel started as a hobby. I was curious about Linux just like everybody else who got started with Linux. What's this Linux? You know, so, thank you for all these years. It's been a lot of fun. Hello, CJ. How are you?
Late as usual, he says.
Okay. Well, he's being diverse. Ha ha. Oh, Steve, you think I'm cute. Thank you, but you're not my type.
So I had two questions here from Agent Stefan that I think are great to talk about here. One of these is more of a general, not necessarily the topic of the day, but just a brief thing. All three of us, I think, are good at talking about this. Why is Linux safer than Windows?
Well, safe is relative. I mean, if we're is it more private? Yes. Is it safer? I think Windows 10, that's not a pirated copy of Windows 10 with all the updates and your antivirus, I think it's perfectly safe. I think it's probably the most safest Windows ever. Now, if we're talking privacy, I'd have to choose Linux. But once you get on the web, I don't know about the privacy. I think it pretty much evens out. But if we're talking privacy, I go with Linux because I think
might
Linux,
have to say
yeah.
an updated Linux computer is going to be as safe, if not safer, than an updated Windows. Just because there are more backdoors, vulnerabilities, and things in Windows than there are. Like, okay, now that's walking into a minefield, so I have to clarify. If you go and you look at reported code bugs, you'll find that Linux has boatloads more of reported errors than Windows. The reason for that is because Linux is an entirely open source community and everybody can audit the code, and so bugs get reported more. Windows is entirely closed source. The only bugs that get on there are the bugs that Microsoft allows on there effectively. And so it looks like, if you're counting number of bugs, errors, and potential backdoors, it looks like Linux has a lot more. The reality is there are thousands that could be actively exploited in Windows and nobody knows about it because the code is not open source. And so for that reason, I think an up-to-date Linux distribution is as secure, if not more secure, than an updated Windows system.
Absolutely.
I think just
privacy. Absolutely. What's that, Tim?
I think just inherently, because of the popularity of the OS. I mean, let's face it, Windows. If you're running Windows, and the last time I ran one, on a real full-time basis, I can't even remember what antivirus I had in it, but I can remember times when the antivirus would have to pull down definition updates, and it would do it seriously like 2-3 times a day. Right? With Linux, there aren't as many people using it, therefore there are not as many people going after it. With Windows, in the time frame, say it's 4 or 5 hours between one definition update to the next definition update, you have so many people trying to exploit things in Windows. You inherently always have that window, albeit a fairly small window, but you do have that window in time where something gets created, and whether you're using the onboard Windows stuff to keep the computer safe, or you have the Norton or the McAfee or whatever else, there's that window of time that the definitions aren't updated, and boom, you're exploited.
Windows is more profitable to attack than Linux right now.
There is one other factor, though, that makes Linux more secure than Windows inherently, and that is the way that it is run. Windows generally is run more as a desktop, meaning that there's more access to the kernel and information through the user than there is on Linux, which is fundamentally at its core was developed for server and user interfaces. And so as long as you're utilizing your Linux system as an isolated user, it is going to be a lot more secure because there's a lot less possibility of backdoor through using a Linux build. And so that's kind of what makes another factor that makes it safer.
Yeah. Well, again, once you get on the web, be very careful about what you post, privacy and all that, because it's a whole different ball game once you get. And that's probably the biggest news of the year in Tech and Review is the number of hacks for big companies. You think they got a budget, they know what they're doing. Maybe they don't, or maybe they don't care.
AJ, this made a comment slash question in Toss's chat. What will we do in Linux when viruses increase, though? Well, that kind of goes back again to inherently right now. It's kind of, to get a real full-fledged virus, it's kind of tough to get a full-fledged virus that's going to affect the entire OS without typing something in a terminal.
Yeah.
So
and part of it, I think, is I haven't run antivirus on my not necessarily up-to-date Windows computers in a good half a decade at least, and I've never had an issue. And the reason is the security has less to do with your operating system, less to do with your patches than it has to do with you. 99.9% of viruses that you're going to get are because you're opening an email attachment, you're visiting a shady website, you're allowing some JavaScript to run, and that's the part where that extra 0.1. In fact, maybe it's becoming closer to 90%, because you can now get viruses just by visiting certain websites on Windows computers, and that could happen on Linux computers as well. It's just not as big of a target. So you have that factor going, but it's a lot more about that. And also the second factor you have to have is a very good router in between your computer and your internet, because the number of people that will attempt to just randomly try and hack into your computer, if you're plugging just from a modem right on in, oh, you're just a host for some nasty site on the internet somewhere already. Don't worry about it, you know. But if
the
you
moral
have
of
a
the story is
blocks
be careful
ports,
out there.
Yep.
That's the moral. Be careful out there, no matter what OS you
Yep.
use. Just a little bit of common sense. You know, websites, shady websites, suspicious emails, stuff like that. You know, it's just be careful. You know,
Absolutely.
And don't install pirated operating systems. Don't do it. So
Yeah, verify your ISOs when you download Linux distros,
So,
things like that. I had Google and Congress on my list. Somebody asked about that. You guys have any comments on Google and Congress?
No, I did catch something about that on the news. I think one of the politicians even said if these companies in general can't fix their act, we will, or something like that, which is fair enough. So, yeah.
I think the whole thing is that when these companies get in front of Congress, I don't think they should be let off easy. I do not think that they should be, unless they are talking about something that has to do with national security, they should not have any of these hearings behind closed doors. And they do not let the people that run these companies out of the freaking room if there's any question whatsoever to the transparency that the people that run these companies put forth. Again, I understand there's trade secrets. The big thing to me is national security. I get it. But if you're there to answer questions, you answer the damn questions, you do it in a truthful manner, and you do it transparently. And whatever your answer is, you dang well better believe that we are going to make sure that your answer is true and correct. And if that means we need to ask people that work for you the same question, they better give the same answers. And if they don't, you're going to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
Steve posted something funny. This is not news and nonsense tonight, Steve, but thank you. I'm not going to repeat it. It's in the chat, but
I see it.
nice.
I had a wonderful comment that is made infinitely more wonderful by the user's name. The comment says, "I don't switch. I use Linux, Mac, and Windows as needed." The person who commented it is the rational pragmatist. Absolutely, guys. That is the definition of pragmatism. I use what works. Yep. I love it. Yeah, that's
Pragmatic
that's
OS. Which one's that? All of them.
That's right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I love that comment and with the user's name, because that's exactly what pragmatism is. It's to use what works, you know. And if the guy needs to do something that Mac is better supported on Mac, you use a Mac, and I'm okay with that as long as you got the money to do that. I just stand behind. Make sure that the vastest majority of your stuff you're doing behind Linux for the ultimate security and privacy. That companies aren't collecting your data and storing it and sending it and receiving it and things like that. That's absolutely right. But there's times you want to jump over. Like if I were a gamer, I'd absolutely have no problem keeping a Windows machine specifically for gaming. I'm booting up and booting down computers all day long anyway. Well, you know, this guy's got an icy dock. If I were a gamer, I'd just boot this guy down, throw a Windows drive in there, boot the guy back up, and play my Windows games.
Well, I'm waiting for the smart fruit of the loom sending, so I can send them my telemetry. Haha.
Maybe that's kind of a good. Maybe we're kind of coming up to the end here, but maybe a good closing topic is what strides has Linux made now? Gaming. I'm the furthest away from the gaming stratosphere as probably anybody is. But
it's gone better.
But the little bit that I've read, to me, unless the news stories that I've read are kind of fluff. But to me, it kind of seems like there has been some really good, not huge strides. I mean, not leaps and bounds, but there have been some very good incremental and very well thought out planned strides.
Again,
on the gaming side,
the potential is there, but from what I've seen and read, still today, they cannot compete with Windows for gaming. Not yet. too many intangibles. You know, the graphics drivers, which cards are going to work best, quality. It's just too much. That's why true gamers are not going to use Linux. They're just not. You know, they're going to use Windows, and I don't blame them. You know, but if we had a national desktop with national, you know, drivers, video graphics cards, that would change. You know, but. Yeah, I mean, mom and pop, they're probably, when they buy a Linux machine or download Linux, they probably don't want to do gaming, if I had to guess. They heard it's safer, you know, it's more private, you know, updates are faster. I heard, you know, maybe they saw Switch said this or Toss said that. That's probably why they're using it, if I had to guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, and John on your channel says Proton is a significant change, to be fair. Biggest in years, and I don't know. I still need to get my friend over here. Maybe I'll do that over the Christmas break. I'll get my friend over here with a Steam account, and we'll install Steam on a computer on this and see how well it works.
Yeah, Steam machines came out a few years ago, and they went, you know, fell flat. So it's
yeah, I'm not sure. Is that even a desktop you can, or an OS you can even get anymore? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Let me look into it.
Yeah.
So of all of us, what, as the year in Linux of 2018 is starting to come to a close, what is the distro that was released that you're happy that it got there? I'm sure with Carmine it's Ubuntu Mate.
Yeah, there really wasn't a what's like a magic distro I was looking for. I just, you know, I'm happy with Ubuntu Mate 1804, now Ubuntu 1810. With my new SSD, but there really wasn't an OS. Oh, I can't wait for that to come out because I'm so curious.
Was there anything that knocked your socks off?
The only thing that knocked my socks off was the speed of the SSD.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was going to be fast, but it's really fast. Yeah, compared to what I had. So that really impressed me.
Tom, you're the big Linux Mint user, and you haven't updated everything to the 19 series yet, right?
No, and there's reasons for that. Less to do with what Linux Mint is doing, more to do with Ubuntu. I think that the Ubuntu 1804 core was rushed, and that's the major downside of Ubuntu's release schedule, where they're like, we always release in April and we always release in October. And look what happened when Windows did that same thing. It deleted a lot of stuff. And the reality is the 1804 Ubuntu core had a lot of problems in it. And everything that is based on that LTS is going to inherit some of those problems. Now, a lot of those issues were fixed in 1810, but 1810 is not LTS, and Linux Mint only bases on LTS. And so any errors that are still remaining errors in the Ubuntu 1804 core are going to remain not only in Linux Mint, but in everything else downstream of Ubuntu 1804 LTS. And so I'm a little concerned with that. I'm not a huge fan of what they did with the paneling in Cinnamon 4, but I completely understand it. And to their awesome credit, they give you the option to go back to the old panel, which is exactly why I went to Linux Mint to begin with.
Yeah.
So for my case, the application packages that I need to be more up to date than the Linux Mint 18 repositories can get me are OBS, LibreOffice, GIMP, and Kdenlive. All four of those things, I can install a repo and have the absolute latest version without upgrading my software. So there's no reason I need to upgrade my software. So I'm staying on 18.3. That's what I'm really recommending, unless you have a brand new computer. And I don't mean you just bought it at the store, but it is a very up-to-date, very new to the market hardware is going to be better supported by Ubuntu 1804. And so in that case, I'd say look at the Linux Mint 19, but ultimately Linux Mint 18.3 is still good, and I'm concerned about there being potential issues with the with it, especially since I really do not like the direction Ubuntu is going with snaps and flat packs. And this is a fascinating thing. I looked into this. Since Ubuntu is committing to all these snaps, they're not updating as much software in their repos, which means anything downstream. For example, the Kdenlive version that you get on Ubuntu 18.04 is older than the Kdenlive you get on Debian Stretch.
Yeah, I've been downloading the app image.
That's, Yeah, and I found that the app image doesn't work right in a lot of cases.
Oh, okay.
Every computer I've tried the app image on, it has not worked right.
Really? It
now,
works pretty
there
good for
is
me,
a stable repo you can get for Kdenlive, so you can get it, the updated version without it, but it's not included in the repos for Ubuntu 18 because they're dedicating to Snap, and because they're dedicating to Snap, they're letting packages go.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem, being is that the number of downstream distros are from Ubuntu.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I think the best thing that I've used, honestly, I think the best thing that I've used and not encountered all these goofy browser errors with trying to use Hangouts and everything else is the stuff that I've used, honestly, in the last 24 to 48 hours. And that is POP 18.10. It's a GNOME desktop. GNOME isn't for everybody, I get it. But it works. I've screwed around with the OS since, I think, yesterday morning. And everything that I do kind of on a day-to-day basis, I've done on the OS. It works. It runs wonderfully. It updates quick, and it's got familiarity to it. About the only thing that I really didn't like is the theming. You know, Ubuntu's got kind of they've got the dark theme, but it always has kind of that brownish kind of tinge to it. You know, it's got the orange stuff and then the brownish type tinge. I didn't like that, so I changed some themes here right before we went live tonight, and it is really, honestly, the OS I'm probably going to use until something falls apart on this.
Whatever works. It goes back to that main theme. You use what works. Just real quickly, John, thank you for the super chat. That's very kind. Merry Christmas to you and your family. So on that note, I'm going to end the stream. I'm ready for my bed OS, as it were. Again, thank you everybody here in the chat.
Tim, if you want to stay on, Tim, I can stay on a little bit longer on my end if you want.
I actually have a question for you. Yeah, Tom, I'd like to ask you.
Okay. All right.
All right, so I'm going to wrap this up here, and thank you everybody here in the chat. Timo, I know you're always busy on the road. Always be safe. Thank you for your support for this year. It's always a pleasure. And I don't have any more scheduled live events for this year. There's only a couple of weeks left in the year anyway. So if I don't see you guys here on the live event, take care. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Be safe, and I hope you have a prosperous and better 2019. So thank you all.
Take care, everybody.
Very cool. All right. Hey, Merry Christmas, Carmine, if I don't talk to you.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. So
I think Carmine's going offline in a moment. Tim, we're still live on my end, Tim. So.
Okay.
Did you have something to ask, public or private?
I can ask you after we're off the air. That's cool.
All right. I'm gonna get off of this. Will this mess up your stream?
I don't think it will. If it will, then I'll email Tim.
Okay. All right, Switch. I'll catch you sometime, and Tim, I'll get back to you during the week. Okay.
Shoot me an email when you have a break in your schedule.
Yeah. Okay. I may have time tomorrow night, maybe. Yeah. All right.
Tomorrow night I'm going to be. Tomorrow the entire day I am occupied.
Okay.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday I'm good. Friday is kind of spotty.
I might catch you Wednesday evening. I'll send you I'll send you an email. Yeah.
I'll throw it on my calendar so I have time aside.
This sounds good. All right. Okay, Switch. I'll see you.
All right.
Yep.
Hey, we'll see you.
Bye bye.
All right, so I did look this up on Steam. Apparently, SteamOS are still rolling out updates. It is still based on Debian 8, which is Jessie, which is pretty old, but the last updates actually came out in July. So in theory, you can still run a SteamOS build. That would be an interesting thing to look into, but I don't know anything more about it there.
Was SteamOS stopping their stopping development? Is that the deal?
It majorly flopped, and I think that a lot of things that went into that made it majorly flop is it had no support from any vendors. It had let's see, no support for vendors. It was a pain to install, and the system requirements were were indeed quite beefy. In fact, the system requirements, if you want to build your own Steam machine, you needed Intel or AMD 64-bit, 4 more gigs of RAM, 200 hard drive. You needed NVIDIA graphics or a Radeon 8500 or later, or Intel graphics, and then, you know, extra stuff as well.
So that's like to me, from a non-gaming user perspective, that's like 1.5 to 2 times what I would typically buy for computer resources.
I'm not sure where the graphics cards lie, but that's that's kind of that. But yeah, let's see if there's any final comments here. Any suggestions for a self-hosted FOSS solution to replace Google Hangouts? Yes, the Talk application on Nextcloud is becoming a little bit nicer and nicer. I still need to test the latest version of it, but that is great. Now, the downside to make that work is you need a Nextcloud instance, and then you need a separate co-turn server, which you can build on top of DigitalOcean, or you can build on top of AWS. Fairly easy to do if you follow the documentation, but that's the best solution I know of for a self-hosted. Trying to see if there's anything else here. Do I think of Chrome OS? Do you have comments on Chrome OS?
Say again, Tom?
Do you have comments on Chrome OS?
What I think of it?
Yeah.
It's flawless for what I use it for. It is 100% completely flawless.
Okay.
You know, you can always get into the argument. You can't go and throw a new shell theme at it. You can't throw new icons at it, things of that nature.
Yeah, so you have no customizability, but for what it does well.
Correct. You're not going to get on it. You're not going to go through, 10 different sets of icons to find out what you like and blah blah blah. But for what it advertises that it's supposed to do, it does it, and it does it really well. The only problem that I have, and this is a small one, I'm the type of guy who I'd like to have a paper copy of something next to me, reading it as I'm looking at something. There is not any real good, awesome, good documentation, paper documentation. Now, could there someday, just like with Windows, I think every rendition of Windows that comes out, there's like, the Windows 10 for Dummies type of thing. And maybe there is, I haven't looked. There might be a Chrome OS for Dummies book out there. And if there is, I'm definitely going to get my hands on one. I haven't looked. But that'd be about the only complaint. But as far as it doing what it says it's going to do, it does it. And it does it without any hiccups. Does it without any complaints. Big problem is it's cloud-centric. You have to have an internet connection. A majority of what you do is on the cloud. On the Pixelbook, I can do I can use LibreOffice, and I can save to a local folder. Works wonderfully, not a problem.
Yeah, I just threw a Chromebook for Dummies Amazon link in the chat.
Oh, it does. There is one out.
Yeah,
now,
it's Chromebook for Dummies, not Chrome OS for Dummies, but I'm guessing essentially the same thing. Though my concern is I'm wondering when it was printed, because if it's something might have changed since then. Which is the downside to get with any computer book. So this was actually first printed November 2014. So this might be pretty out of date.
Yep, it's definitely not going to have anything in it regarding installation of Linux apps.
No.
It definitely won't, because I think the prerequisite on older Chromebooks to run Linux apps on it, you have to be running kernel 3.8 or better to be able to install Linux apps on it.
Yeah, I mean, what about just grabbing finding a good guide and just printing it?
I haven't looked. You can find the guides. In fact, one of the best guides for the installation of Linux apps, there's a couple of different YouTube channels. Chrome Unboxed, Chrome Unboxed is really good. And There is a Reddit page. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but there's a Reddit page regarding Linux apps on Chrome OS specifically, and there are some great pinned articles on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. Reddit to me has actually had the better field of resources so far as Linux apps on Chrome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's been really good.
All right, I think I'm about ready to end this out so I can get some other stuff done this evening. So thanks for coming along, everybody, and Tim for being here on this Life in Linux as well. So this is probably going to be our last one for this year. I'm going to continue streaming. However, this week might start getting weird. So I'm not sure when I'm going to stream, when I'm going to do videos, things like that. So thanks for coming along, everybody, and have yourselves a wonderful and Merry Christmas if I do not see you from there.
Merry Christmas, everybody. And take care, and hope you have a great, safe New Year.